Focus Tech lying to consumers, Chinese company stealing IP, Josef Prusa calling out problematic organizations for GPL violations, and issue 602. All this and more, PrintFixFriday, episode 44. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and YouTube's longest running weekly Print Fail Fix series. But we actually need your help. We're running out of fails to cover, and we have very few people that are actually helping us out. So thank you to those that are bringing us some fails. So make sure that when you do a fail or you find one that's interesting online, to tag us on the social medias and use the hashtag PrintFix. You can also email them to me at YouTube3dmusketeers.com. so that we can go through the fails and add them to the videos. Your help would be greatly appreciated for something like this. We're going to be starting off with a resin printer that I think has got a little bit of resin under the screen, and it's time to replace it. We then move into sometimes listening to manufacturers is not always the best way to do things, with supports welded to the part itself. Then we go into Chinese companies and intellectual property. It's a long talk, but it's a good one. From there, we talk about Focus Tech and their 6X actually not being 6X. They must be using man math from what I can tell. From there, I go into talking a little bit more about Josef Prusa and Bambu Lab and PrusaSlicer and the GPL issues that are going through there. After that, we move into a fan submission from local maker MI, who didn't listen to me, and it cost him dearly. From there, we go into issue 602 with the Mark III's. If you don't know what it is, stick around for that one. It's a little complicated, and I would love your opinions on it. After that, we look at an Ender 3 that's oozing a little bit on the first layer, but I don't think it's actually ooze. And finally, we end off on a nice note. I think you guys will enjoy it. But I know, based on our metrics, what you don't enjoy. My segue to our sponsor, 3D Musketeers. Remember, if you want to get prints made, 3D Musketeers is your source for high-end 3D printing, 3D scanning, and rapid prototyping needs. We understand that print failures suck, and it's an absolute pain in the ass. We can help you make that happen. We sponsor our own episodes because we are looking for channel sponsors as well. So if you would like to sponsor episodes, please reach out to us and let's talk about what that might take. Love to have people to help us make this thing happen. But we understand an entire episode might cost a little bit. A couple of bucks in that creator fund might be something that you're capable of doing. And if so, we'd love to have it. You can go to our Patreon for as little as $1 a month and help us make the videos that you guys enjoy every single week. But yeah, like and subscribe goes a long way as well. But let's get back into those fails. Please help. New LCD time? Yep. Yeah, it's the start of a failing LCD right there. Elegoo Mars 2, they had a print break the FEP and some resin leaked. Oh, that might be resin underneath the screen. This is the result of an exposure test. I've not seen this result before, either full fail or it works 100%. I agree. It's not all that common to see it kind of midway, and there's just a little tint of black in there is what they're saying. And as you can see, the one on the right is darker than expected, but not completely blacked out. Any advice, or am I going to Amazon to order a replacement? Yeah, if resin leaked and it got under there like this, there's really no easy way to fix it. It could be between your screen protector and your screen, so look at peeling up your screen protector. But it looks like, because of the little bits of light bleed that I can see, you might have already done that. New screens are not expensive. Go ahead and order and install the new one. That's got to be an upcoming video that we do where we install a new screen on a resin printer. So let me know if you guys want to see that in the comments. That might be a fun video. And I think Brad actually wants to be involved in that because he wants to take home the printer that we fix. So that might be a thing. Support merging. Help. The supports merge. Any clue why this could happen? Even though it looks like there's space between each pillar, there is not. It's solid. I printed on a Mars 3 Pro standard resin translucent. It is blue because after that I use for testing paint and recommended settings. Bottom exposure of 48, normal exposure of 8, layer height of 50 microns. Oh, this is not your fault, and I'm pissed off about this shit because this is from the manufacturer. Let's take a look. Originally, like Mr. Catlett here, thank you again to Chris Catlett for providing us some of these fails. We do appreciate it. They're using settings from here. Let's see. They say they have a Mars 3 Pro, and looking at their standard resin, this should be where their exposure settings are. For some reason, they say to use an 8-second exposure time on the ABS-like translucent or clear. Don't do that. That's not right. Don't, no. Manufacturers, if you're going to provide people with support and, relatively useful things like this big list of all the Elegoo resins and which ones to use for what exposure times and all that, translucent resins do not need 8 seconds on a mono screen printer. They just don't. In a case like this, they are clearly overexposing, and I agree with Mr. Catlet here saying 35 seconds base exposure, maybe 2.8 or so, and then print to calibration part, which is going to be either the Amerilabs Toontown or the cones of calibration. My preference is the cones of calibration personally. They're way easier to read. We actually recently interviewed Ty from Table Flip Foundry. We'll card to his episode of the podcast if you want to learn more about the cones, because there is more to them than meets the eye. And on a machine like this, you can drop the UV power to 65% to prevent light bleed. And if you are going to paint the parts, which it looks like the individual is going to do, I agree, opaque gray resin like Soraya Tech Fast Gray is my preference. This is not the model file being corrupted. This is not right. Thankfully, Chris Catlett is on the case. Thanks, dude. Oh, sometimes we just gotta cover fails as we see them, and sometimes these fails are a little bit problematic. So, Chinese companies have been illegally mass producing my 3D printing models without my consent, and I cannot do anything about it. That is absolutely correct. And if you're wondering, Grant, why can't I do anything about it? Well, I will send you to the episode of the podcast that we just had with Seth Polanski, attorney at law, who is an IP attorney and an awesome guy. I think you guys are going to love him. We'll card to that episode so you can take a look, where we talk all about China being, unfortunately, a bit of a bad actor when it comes to intellectual property. And while there is some blame to them, there's also a fair bit of blame to us, or at least those in the United States. We've made the patent system so complicated that it's not designed to help the little guy like the original poster for this. There's no way for them, because intellectual property overseas is not a thing. There's been no standard that's been set globally. There was never an attempt with an olive branch to try to set something like this. So if another company steals your shit and they're overseas, you're fucked. And there is nothing that you can do unless you want to build a Chinese entity, go over there, learn the native language, assimilate with the culture, and then try to sue them. And by that point, you've wasted so much of your damn time. Is it even worth it anymore? I would argue, no, sir, it is not. This is the kind of shit that pisses me off, though, because this individual that's had, maybe not the most safe for work ideas out there, but fine, whatever, not want to create more. And yep, as the mod saying, this entire comment section is a giant mess and it's gone a step too far. Nearly all the comments are simply hate, so they will simply lock them. And it's not, as some of the commenters say, they do this with everything. No, they don't. And they is a very bad way to paint that picture. So let's step back a little bit and talk about Chinese manufacturers, right? There are not all bad. Just like if you think one way politically and other people think the other way, they're all not bad. Some of them are on both sides, but not all of them. I found good people that agree with me, good people that disagree with me, and bad people that agree with me, and bad people that disagree with me. There are still phenomenal companies out there in the People's Republic of China that will maintain intellectual property, that will follow the rules, but there are some that don't, and that's the same here in the States. Unfortunately, because this is not a United States company, there's basically nothing the person can do. On eBay, they might be able to file a DMCA takedown request and get that removed. I would look at doing that, especially if you can prove that you do own the rights to it. But you also have to make sure that your models were put with the correct license. And as we talked about with Seth, the Creative Commons has no teeth to it. And until companies get together and say, we need to build a system of Creative Commons that also has some teeth to it, where there are actually, penalties for those bad actors, nothing is going to change. And I've got a particular problem with that because so far, a lot of the major companies, they don't care. They own the factories in China. They don't generally have to deal with it too much. And when they do, they've got the money to just sue the other companies into oblivion. Remember, this sole individual does not have the money to defend themselves up against a major company, whether it's in China or the United States for that matter. The system's not designed to help people like you and I, and that's a shame. And that means as 3D designers, you might not want to post your models in a place where anybody could download them because you can't control what people do. It's a shame, but that's the way it has to be sometimes. What's my solution here? I don't have one. What I would like to do is look at you, the community, and say, we can do better. I would like to work with members of the community, and I'm working with some already, to build a system that can keep people accountable, no matter where you're located in the world. Of course, it's a pipe dream. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take many, many, many years before we could ever get something like that. And it's going to require people in other countries to assist us with native languages, governments, and the like to make something like this happen. But I believe that in the end, it is worth it if we can build a system that actually supports creative thought and doesn't reward those who are willing to steal. Anyways, speaking of stealing and lying, we got crusty Mr. Chris Russell, Practical Printing, calling out Focus Tech, or Fokoos, or other names. Why do companies make names that are so close to curse words? Because it just makes it easier for me to say Focus. And then we don't even know what to bleep out, do we? And they're claiming their new Odin Smart is 6x faster, but what are they comparing it to? Looking at the latest firmware for the F5, it has a max feeder of 200 millimeters a second. So that's not 6x faster. I would like to know what the reference is for the 6x increase, please. And, yeah. Yep. Nothing. We got a whole lot of nothing. And that's gonna make sense because Focus doesn't care. If you are 6x faster at 200 millimeters per second, then you're running like, what, 30 something millimeters per second normally? Even the $50 3D printer that I unboxed and looked at so long ago, and by the way, actually has thermal running card to that old crappy video if you guys want to look at it, can print faster than 30 something. So honestly, it's bullshit. And this is because they're using Marlin. They're using stock settings on Marlin, which is going to limit feed rate to 200 millimeters per second. It is what it is, guys. It's the same deal. We have to call out companies the same way that Prusa called out Bambu Lab, where Bambu Lab is utilizing open source software developed by PrusaSlicer, in their Bambu slicer, but they have not released the source code as per GPL guidelines. Their Kickstarter is over, and they are presumably immediately starting to ship machines. And while, yes, there could be an argument made that realistically that software is not in the hands of end users and just reviewers, it's still kind of a dick move. And remember, there are 2 rules in life. 1, don't be a dick. 2, if you're gonna be a dick, be a big one. And unfortunately, they've gone to rule number 2. So Josef Prusa decided to also go to rule number 2. Let's take a look. I guess this explains why we started getting Bambusa entries into our database shortly after releasing PrusaSlicer 2.4. Oopsies. We introduced opt-in to anonymously send us system info with this version, and the Bambu reskin looks nice. What are your thoughts on this? 1 of 2. And 2 of 2, it is AGPL 3.0, and we are still adding based on Slick 3R, even after massive rewrite because we are proud of the heritage. And unfortunately, nothing has been done. And thank you to Mr. Adam Hiley, a awesome maker, who we actually recently interviewed as well on the podcast. We'll card to his episode so you can take a look at it, where he's the one that found all of this and actually broke the story with Joseph going through and talking about it. And with PrusaSlicer 2.4, that's been out for a long time. In fact, we're on 2.5 Alpha 2 right now, which I love. We're upcoming video on the new features in 2.5 coming very soon, so get subscribed if you're not. But like, guys, seriously, if you're gonna play by the rules and you're gonna utilize open source stuff, play by the fucking rules and don't steal things from other companies, especially from Prusa. Like, they've got such a ridiculous following at this point, right? It's non-trivial. And I don't get it, guys. Like, I don't get it. Things still haven't been fixed. I don't know when it's going to happen. And we have some things with Cheaty as well, using a modified version of Cura that James Von Kessel talked about. Look, another podcast guest carding to that episode, and they're still not adhering to open source licenses. I don't understand what it is about companies thinking that they're above the rules. I know why they're doing it, because there is nothing in the open source community that forces you to follow the rules. In fact, the only thing that can is basically being shunned by people inside of the community. And reviewers like Joel the 3D printing nerd and others have made kind of the pact to not really talk about machines that are made by companies such as these bad actors when they're able to do so, because ultimately it's just giving publicity and marketing to companies that don't deserve it. And I totally agree with that. Now, I'm not as big as them. I don't have the fancy review printers that are violating these GPL requirements, so whatever. But I stand in solidarity with them to understand that it is going to hurt their channels, it is going to hurt their businesses, but it is the right move for the community, and thank you all for being stand-up people about it. Seriously. Next up, we got a fan submission from local maker MI, and it is the only possible ending. And as I say, if you like it, then you should put a brim on it. And that's true. You should. Local maker MI, you knew you should have done it. You decided not to do it, and you get what you deserve. I'm being mean. We're friends. I hope it's fine. But yeah, you should have seen that one coming. It looks like you got a blob of doom. Put a heater sock on your friggin' Mini, please. Please. It wants a sock so bad. Just please. Give Dobby a sock.
Dobby is free.
But yeah, nice and simple. And this is exactly why we can't have nice things. He flew too close to the sun, got a little burned, learned his lesson, and hopefully won't make that mistake again. Moving on. Okay, if you own a Mark III's, you might know about issue 602. I own a few Mark III's, and I've never seen this particular problem, but let's go through it, kind of talk about issue 602. Let's talk about my thoughts about it, and let's kind of see what the move is. We've got a user that says, should I persist with my Mark III's in the Prusa 3D Discord? So I'd heard nothing but good things about the Mark III's. Yeah, because it's pretty freaking great. I love mine. How it is the best consumer grade 3D printer on the market, and how everything just worked. Yeah, it does generally. I've been doing some prints using an Anycubic Mega Pro. I thought it did a pretty good job for the price, about 1/10 of what it cost me for the Prusa. That printer was like $100. That seems a lot cheaper than I think you're leading on to, but whatever. It had some issues with bed warping and adhesion, not to mention some build issues around wire straining, etc. So you've put some time and effort into it. Its cost was more than 1/10 of that of the Prusa. Let's take a look at the amount of time that you've put into it, and let's look at what that value comes out to be before we start comparing prices. So I made the jump to Mark III's, got a factory assembled, which is a good key point, that you did not do the kit yourself, and some things can get a little loose. But anyways, they were excited for the first print with the model they'd attempted to print on the Anycubic, which was a large case. When it finished, they were shocked to see how bad the print quality came out compared to the Anycubic. Adhesion on the first layer looked fine, but there were so many artifacts in the print. Examples here. See, this doesn't seem right to me. It looks like something is clearly loose on the printer. Like, I've never seen benchies that look like that. I've never seen walls that look like that on any of my Prusas. Our printers seem to do just fine. Initially, I thought it was a problem with the machine. They spent a lot of time with Prusa support and the reseller who I got it from in their country, who's been good. Great. Glad you've had good support there so far. Helped diagnose, but nothing helped. They eventually came across issue 602, which is described pretty cleanly as inconsistent extrusion. They described the problem they were having, but it was back in 2018, and it seems like it still hasn't really been resolved. Seems something to do with the dual gear extrusion, but nothing was ever really done about it. They love everything about this printer but the print quality of that aspect, but it's such a significant one that I really don't like looking at the prints it produces. TLDR, I've discovered print quality issue on my Mark III's Plus is not good. Is it worth somehow trying to persist with this printer and finding ways to make print quality better? Or having spent the last 2 weeks trying to diagnose problems, am I wasting my time and I should just return it and find a better solution for what I'm wanting to do? Looking at some of the comments, this is actually kind of interesting. It says, my first print came out like this and worse. My results were that of a loose scrub screw on one of the belt pulleys attached to my Y-axis motor. The other thing that helped was getting a filament dehydrator. Night and day differences between the prints with some filaments. Yes, PETG can benefit from being dried, but a lot of times it's not exactly required. They're saying that they've checked all the screws, but they'll have another look. Specifically, take a look at the grub screws and the ones on the actual extruder itself. If those are slipping even a little bit, you'll get inconsistent extrusion from retractions because you'll cause some backlash in it. I don't think that's immediately what's causing the problems, kind of based on what I'm seeing, but I also don't think it's something that should be ignored. They've tried 5 different fresh out of the pack filaments, including the Prusament Silver. It's not technically Prusament, but that's a whole nother discussion for another day, and the problem is it's on all of one of them. So you're good. You've actually been trying other filaments, not just white, because you know my feelings about white filament, and they don't think it's filament. I would agree. I don't think it's filament. Flow is set to 100%. If you're running stock PrusaSlicer, flow actually sets to 95%. So verify that as well. The printers do kind of deliberately over extrude a little bit, and they deal with that by turning down the extrusion rate. You can just go through and set your steps per millimeter and leave it at 100, but I don't mind the way that they handle it. It seems to work just fine for my experiences. And we do happen to get very nice looking prints out of our Prusas. In fact, this is a bust of Saruman that we recently did for a time lapse. And yeah, the model looks really, really good. And white filament is going to show you a lot of the problems. Now, it's design white, so it's not pure white, but still, it's going to show you a lot of the problems. And I'm not really personally seeing any that aren't immediately caused by the issues that we have with the time-lapse system. We've got a video from Mihai Designs where he talks about removing one of the gears. Now, I haven't had a chance to watch it. It's 14 minutes long, so go ahead and take a watch if you guys want. We'll put a link to it in the description down below. I don't know if I would get rid of one of the gears, but you could do it and just replace it with some sort of idler wheel. It should work. But yeah, it's not wet filament, and even I said it. You can generally assume that most of your filament comes dry as long as you're getting it from a reputable reseller. I guess I don't know what some of the problems are. I would immediately look at going full bone stock on PrusaSlicer. No, don't change anything. Anything. And see what happens. But I don't know if that's going to solve the problems. I would look at making sure all your grub screws are tight. They've done kind of everything that I would say. Use the same filament across 2 printers. Definitely had some bed adhesion issues there. But you can clearly see there's more wiggling here versus here. I think it's an extrusion issue. It is. It looks like inconsistent extrusion. I would make sure that everything is buttoned up, right? When you're getting pre-assembled printers, they're shipped from the Czech Republic. It can get quite a beating during shipping and go through it. Unfortunately, there are so many little things to try, and it does not appear that they're in the United States. So I'm not exactly sure how I can personally help out anymore. I'd love to know, you guys, the viewers, if you have Mark 3Ss and you think you've dealt with the 602 issue, have you resolved it? Have you just lived with it? Does it piss you off? I don't know. I'd love to know down in those comments below. Is this a Z-hop issue? Exactly where do I find it in Cura so that it stops dragging across the base after circles? This is combing. It's actually dragging across everywhere. You can actually see it's coming from the outside of the perimeter circle, and that is because it's your first layer. It is typical for a first layer not to have any Z-hop. You can put it in and get rid of combing. It's a thing. It's fine. It's just going to affect that bottom layer. It just won't look as pretty, but it's not going to affect anything on the print itself. Now, if you are seeing issues with it still dragging across the part throughout the rest of the print, then yes, it is Z-hop, and you should be able to adjust it inside of Cura. It is combing. See, look at that. He knew what he was talking about. And for something like this, you can look at turning off combing and using Z-hop instead. That should work. Also, make sure that your retraction settings are set well. This appears to be Bowden printer, so out fast, in slow, and everything should be good to go. Hey, that's a little saying. Out fast, in slow, everything should be good to go. Oh, that's gonna be taken out of context. Damn it. And last but not least, it was removed from r/aw, but I think it's adorable. It is an older gentleman being shown a 3D printer by his grandson.
No,
Yeah.
it was not him.
Take it. Feel it. It takes this plastic right here.
If this doesn't warm your cold heart, I don't know what will. We'll link the entire thing down below, but suffice to say, that expression on his face, pretty consistent through the whole thing. This is what I love about this industry, is that we are able to inspire those that didn't know the technology existed to look at things a little bit differently. We're able to take a generation that worked with their hands, that built things using welders and erector sets, and show them what can be done with modern technology for fractions of the cost for what they used to. And that's not to say we don't use welders now. It's just not taught in schools anymore. I love that this is one of those opportunities that you don't get to see often. I've experienced this personally a few times, especially working for the local science museum for a little bit, showing 3D printing to randos off the street. And when we had our retail business, it was wonderful to just have people experience it for the first time. And never, ever be rude to someone whose just mind is blown about it, because remember, you were like them at one point as well. It's what I love about this industry. It's so new that it is able to get to a point where we can still amaze those that think that they're up to date, and those that aren't up to date have just as much fun. Remember to educate those around you and just honestly be good humans. Right? That's part of what we do here when we say stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Yeah, that's right. I did that. You didn't think it was coming, and I did. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to comment below what you thought about these fails and how we fixed them, and specifically about that Prusa issue. And a massive thank you goes out to all of our Patreon and YouTube channel member supporters whose names are listed right next to me at the $5 tier and higher. Remember, if you want to support what we do here, you can do so by clicking the links down in that description and joining our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Right below me will be the entire Print Fix Friday series. Give it a click so you can learn more about fails and how to fix them. And right next to that is going to be our interview with Seth Polanski, one of my favorite podcasts to date. I think you guys will enjoy it. I'll see you guys down in those comments and in the next one. Take care.